Can everyone hear me? You can hear me, John? Okay, great. So everyone's completely welcome to continue eating. I know we cut lunch short, so I apologize for running over a little bit, but I thought we would get started with our next presentation session. That's going to be presented by MITRE. It's Diane and Ed from MITRE. Diane's in the back there. And they'll be talking about MDIAS. With that, everyone can continue to eat, and here's Ed.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I've got just a few short slides here just to give a brief overview of what we are working together to collaboratively define the Medical Device Information Analysis and Sharing Program, MDIAS program to be. And then I'll turn the floor over to Diane, who's going to lead a discussion with some of the group here who have been able to spend the last couple of days with us, kind of getting your hands dirty and working on some of the co-creation of this program. But for those of you who haven't spent the past couple of days with us, just a brief overview of what it is that we are envisioning the MDIAS program to be. Again, MDIAS stands for Medical Device Information Analysis and Sharing. And it is a data sharing public-private partnership that is being modeled off of successful partnerships like this from other domains. And for those of you who were at the forum back in November, you may recall me talking about some of the experiences that I've had with aviation, working on an aviation safety public-private partnership, very similar to what it is that we're trying to conceive here with MDIAS. But it represents a data sharing collaboration for the common good, seeking to improve healthcare outcomes through improved device quality. That's what it is that we are trying to achieve. That's the overarching goal and the mission for what it is that we're trying to build here. And the whole idea for the partnership kind of stems from, the recognition I think that we all have that when you are able to pool data, pool resources, and look at things at the system level, you're able to identify risks and vulnerabilities that present themselves that may not be apparent to any single individual organization looking only at their own set of data, only at their own set of resources. It's really when you are pooling data, looking at the system as a whole, that you're able to identify, some of these, rare events that are impacting the entire system. So why consider a public-private partnership? So public-private partnerships, they establish a framework for collaboration, working together collaboratively with the government and the industry. And it's really through the identification of common interests that both parties have and provides the framework for collaboration to achieve that shared goal, that shared mission. They're rooted in co-creation, co-design, and co-resource mobilization towards that shared goal. So it's something that both sides, both government and industry, have an equal voice and equal say in designing and creating and standing up, what the partnership is, what its goals are, what its vision is, and what it hopes to accomplish. So public-private partnerships are successful when, as I was saying, there's that really gnarly problem that's out there, but any individual organization by themselves, maybe you don't have the data, you don't have the resources, but you're not able to tackle that problem working in a silo, working by yourself. It's through the collaboration and bringing together all the different groups within the ecosystem to, as I said, pool data, shared resources that you're able to identify and really understand the contributing factors and the resultant outcomes for whatever that risk is. And you're able to work it together collaboratively, and it provides the framework to do so. So just real quick, what we're kind of envisioning as a initial framework for the MDIAS program. And I'm going to kind of lay this out and then focus a bit on the role of the trusted third party. We've been talking about the trusted third party kind of at this kind of ethereal level almost, but we haven't really talked about the details of what the role of that trusted third party is. So that's what I'm going to be focusing the majority of the rest of the presentation on. But before I do that, just a real quick framework for MDIAS. We have all these different partner organizations that we've identified to work together initially as we're standing up and running a proof of concept and trying to co-create the program, including manufacturers, providers, and the agency. All these different groups have data of some sort, some form that will be shared, as I said, with this trusted third party. And the trusted third party, the role of the trusted third party is to be that of an independent convener to help bring all the different players of the partnership together to work on whatever the pressing issues are, to be the data steward, to collect this data and to be a data steward for it, and then to do the analysis on that data, having access to the aggregate database. And more on what each of those three elements mean in the coming slides. But conceivably, at the end, coming out of the trusted third party would be those analysis results, looking across the entire system. So what are the systemic analysis results, systemic trends that we're seeing through the analysis of all that data that is being pooled? And that leads to some of the outcomes that we've been talking about, enabling the agency, enabling the industry partners to work to improve device quality, having a better understanding of what some of those systemic risks are, conducting predictive analytics, ultimately improving the quality of care that the patient receives. So as I said, I'm going to be focusing on some of the specifics of the role of the trusted third party. And there are really, in my mind, 5 key steps, and a bit more about each one of these 5 in the coming slides, but it involves data collection, data management, data preparation, analysis, and collaboration. So as I said, the role of the trusted third party is to be that of, that independent convener, helping to connect partners, bringing all the groups together to work on an issue, work on some opportunity to improve the system as a whole. It's to be the data steward, to manage the data, to ensure it's safe and secure, protected, and that it is staged appropriately for analysis, and then conducting the analysis itself, making sure that we are only granting access to the data to people who are approved to see that, that we're ensuring that analysis and the visuals that are generated as a result are shared back out to the community as appropriate, and that they're done so in such a way that it provides the ability for action to be taken. So I'll start with data collection and kind of talk through the details of what each one of these steps are. So data collection is really primarily about data ingest, bringing data in, and establishing the transfer mechanisms between the individual organization and the trusted third party, such that the data can be shared in a safe and secure manner. To do that, it requires almost certainly data use agreements, some sort of formal legal agreement to be established between the organization and the trusted third party that will define the actions that the organization will take in providing the data, how frequently they'll be providing the data, what data they'll be providing, and then the actions that the trusted third party will take in receiving the data, committing to protecting the data, storing it in a secure environment. Data management. There are a few things here to talk about with respect to data management. The first is what we call extract, transform, and load, ETL for short. And these are a series of processes whereby data is read in its source format, whatever it is that is shared with the trusted third party from the organization. It's transformed into whatever form is needed by the trusted third party to do the analysis. And then it's written to an aggregate database that would contain data from all the different organizations that are providing data. So in a nutshell, that's when we talk about ETL, you might hear that acronym be thrown about. That's really all it is. It's just reading data in the format that is coming from the partner, transforming it into whatever form is needed for the aggregate analytics. As we do that, the trusted third party will be inspecting the data to ensure that it has high data quality, that it is, you know, I'm sure everyone here has heard garbage in, garbage out. You know, we want to be sure that the data that we're working with is as clean as possible and of high quality as possible, so that the results that are generated on the back end are going to be actionable and be valuable. So some of the things that we might consider here with respect to, you know, validating the data that comes in, you know, data loss, for example, you know, are there any fields that we didn't receive that we were expecting to receive? Are there any specific parameters that are empty, that don't have any values associated with them, that are unexpected? Maybe there are some files that have a 0 file size, you know, pointing to potential data corruption. Maybe the data that's populated in the fields is garbage, is nonsensical, doesn't make sense. You know, those are all sorts of things that the trusted third party would look at when receiving the data, just to make sure that it's of high quality and it makes sense and is useful for analysis. Then the last thing that we would do with respect to data management is identifying and defining metadata. Metadata is essentially just data about data. So capturing things like the who, what, where, when, why, how, for all the different data sources and the data fields, who created this data, where is the data stored, what is the business definition for certain data elements, you know, those sorts of things, just so the analysts within the trusted third party who are accessing the data have a good working knowledge of what that data are, how it can be used, and how it can provide value. Okay, moving on to data preparation. The first step here is data fusion, and we've talked about fusion. Great, Scott. Everyone here has seen Back to the Future, I assume. I grabbed this screen grab on purpose. It's at the very end of the movie, after Doc has come back from the future and is, you know, back to bring Marty and his girlfriend Jennifer back to the future. But before he does so, he needs to refuel the DeLorean, and he has this new fangled contraption that he's installed in the future, all the way in 2015, on the back of the car, called Mr. Fusion. And if you remember the scene, he opens up Mr. Fusion and he throws in the banana peel, he throws in, you know, an empty beer can or something, and he closes it, and then Mr. Fusion takes all that stuff that's been put into it and turns it into the 1.21 gigawatts of energy that's needed to go back to the future. Data fusion is kind of like that. We're taking in all the different data and we are joining it together to try and provide something on the back end that it provides more value than each of the different individual components by themselves. That's what we're trying to accomplish with data fusion. It's joining all these disparate data sets that we're getting from all these different participating organizations and trying to use that to identify some of the additional contextual information that will provide more value when we are doing the analysis itself. Next step is data mining. So as we're continuing to prepare the data, you know, there are some things that we might do just looking for things like spelling errors. In my experience working in aviation, one of the most commonly misspelled words is maintenance. You may not know this, there are over 90 different ways to spell maintenance. And, you know, a naive analyst who's looking at data and just does a simple query for the word maintenance, you're not going to get all those other 89 different spellings. People have creative ways of spelling words. So are there ways to go into the data and using that as an example, being able to associate all those reports that maybe have a word misspelled, but it's really saying the same thing, associating all those reports together so that when you run your query, you're getting back a fully representative data set. Another example is what I call topic modeling. And this is more of a data-driven approach. You don't have an idea, you don't have a preconceived idea of what you want to go in and query the data for, but you're looking for features and elements within the data that naturally group together, naturally cluster together. And there are clustering algorithms that you can run to group the data into these different clusters. And that results in a data set that you can then go in and look at and analyze and see, okay, what does this cluster mean? How is it different from this cluster? How is it different from this one? We do this, we set up automated processes to do this because all the data that we are going to be receiving, it's too much to process manually. It's too much to process manually. So we need automated processes like this so that as we're bringing in data from all these different players, we have the tools and the capability to be able to analyze the data and get that information that we need to provide back out to the community. Okay, so now we're ready to do analysis at this point. So data's been ingested, it's been staged, it's been fused, it's been mined, and now we can conduct a study. Now we can do analysis. So this is where we would build algorithms, build statistical models, run tests, examining relationships between variables, things like doing statistical regression. I won't go into the details of exactly what, all the different things that we can do, but suffice it to say, all that stuff that I've been talking about is all the pre-work that's required, that's needed to get the data ready to conduct the analysis. It's not as simple as bringing the data in and then you're ready to analyze it. There's a lot of pre-work that's required to get to this point. After we have done the analysis, then we can start thinking about preparing aggregate results. And they can take a couple of different forms that we've been talking about. Could be a study report. Could be in the form of a personalized benchmark report that will be shared back to an individual partner. It could be in the form of a systemic trend, systemic metrics, looking at the system as a whole that we would provide back out to all the partners to look at and to study and to take action against. And then the last part is to enable collaboration and work with the partners to provide those results back out in some sort of visual form that is easily understandable, easily digestible, and is something that you can then take action upon. So there's a lot of iterating back and forth, collaborating with the partners who are participating to get to the point where we have a set of visuals that are actionable. So with that, in a very small nutshell, that's a little more detail into the role of the trusted third party, the different steps, what it is to be the trusted third party. Are there any questions at this point? For the phone, yeah.
Third party, have you had any consideration towards things like master data management and how that would interact between the different partner ecosystems and the trusted third party, which is now containing transformed layers of data? Have you given that any sort of consideration, or is it still too early in the sort of process?
I think with respect to this partnership, it's a bit too early. We still have a lot of co-creation to do with the different organizations, identifying different data sources, and all that will be stuff that we work on over the course of the next 4 to 6 months or so as we start developing, working through a proof of concept and identifying what are some of those different data sources, how might we bring them in, how can we turn that into information that is then actionable. I think what you say is more of a long-term goal as we start thinking about what's required to operationalize a more mature MDIAS program, something that will be sustainable for the long term. Thinking about master data management would absolutely be a big part of that. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague from MITRE, Diane Kula, who's going to lead a discussion around some of the events of the past couple of days that many of you have been able to help us to work through. So Diane?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Yeah, I don't like being at a podium. I like walking around. So people have been with me the last 2 days. They know I circled the room a bunch of times. Welcome, everybody. Thanks to everyone who's sticking with us from the last couple of days. Excited to have the rest of you here with us today. As Ed mentioned, we're fairly early in sort of the life cycle of this MDIAS effort. If you think of it like where are we in the movie, I think we're still in the opening credits, from a life cycle perspective. So a number of the folks that are here in the room today have spent the last 2 days with members of the MITRE team, really sort of helping us start to explore some of these sort of foundational questions about really what do we want MDIAS to be, what's our vision for it, what is success going to look like, what are some of the types of early research questions or topic areas that we might want to focus on as an initial proof of concept to really sort of figure out what's it going to take to make this successful and start small and to learn and build along the way. So I wanted to invite some of the folks who are there. Maybe Adrian, you want to share your thoughts and reflections in terms of from a stakeholder perspective?
So thanks, Adrian Brott, currently at BD. It was a great opportunity to everybody knows me as J&J, so I have to remind them that I moved companies. Formerly known as Johnson & Johnson, currently BD. It was a great 2 days to come together and recognize what I think we all recognize in this community. It's our privilege to serve and as a part of the healthcare ecosystem. And what an opportunity we have to come together collectively to solve a problem or a common issue that individually we may not be able to solve. So I think it was inspiring to recognize that there's a lot of contributions. I think we don't know what the problem is we're trying to solve yet, but I think it opened our eyes up to what I think we've known in some of the initiatives that we've chosen to participate in together all along is we collaborate very well, but maybe we can take it to a different level when you start thinking about problems like how do you keep airplanes in the air. Trying to get quality as a degree in a college doesn't seem quite as so what was the game-changing event that we can come to together that can take from the wisdom and the learnings of the MDIAS efforts and of the learnings from a data analytics perspective that we may not be able to see across data sets in our industry, all for the good for advancing healthcare. Thanks.
You hear me? Okay, good. Kim, do you have some thoughts? Kim was with us as well.
So thankfully, I am not duplicating or conflicting with what Adrian said. I'm with Baxter, and honestly, there have been over the years, when we talk data at our sites, and you guys probably know we have tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of manufacturing sites. We're always looking at the data at those sites, which is great. And those sites can then individually improve. But we started over the last 3 to 5 years, started looking enterprise-wide. And when you start to look enterprise-wide, now you get certain trends and certain things you can look at across your organization. How do you improve? Not just have a 483 at one particular site and address it there. Let's look at it across the board. Do we have something that we have to put in place to address it everywhere? So that's great. But what we have the opportunity to do here is to look at it across the industry. So is the industry doing something? Can we get in and actually address something that the industry is looking at or an issue that the industry is dealing with? And that's what this brings us, allows us to do. And so the more companies that get involved, the more companies that these voices are heard, and can supply data, the better off we'll be, and ultimately, to Adrian's point, safer patients, right? So that's really, I think, what we learned over the last couple days is we are good collaborators. We can do it better and even more. We are, what did I put down? Greater clarity, I think, around where we're headed associated with that. We moved towards a sort of a shared vision, which I don't know that we had clarity around before. And we did see a panel of initiatives that we could take advantage of. You know, their lessons learned. They've done this in the airline industry. They've done it in the healthcare industry for fraud. Done it in the automotive industry, et cetera. So there's a lot of folks that we can learn from. We'll make it our own, of course, but a lot of folks that we can learn from here. And then lastly, we had fun with activities that kept us awake. And we had a lot of food and a lot of laughs. So that was an important part of our last 2 days. So thank you.
Great. Any other, I guess, for others who were with us the last couple of days, any other sort of thoughts or insights, reflections? So Cisco, I think you have the floor next, so I'm going to put you on the spot. I guess, what are your sort of takeaways from the last couple of days?
So I think just from the interaction that we were having, I think one of the big takeaways was that there is a genuine interest. There's a understood value. I think, like you said, that we don't know the problem we're trying to solve. Let me put a little extra spin on that. I think we know that the problem we want to solve is that, just from an FDA standpoint, right? We need better information. We need better data. That's going to just help and drive and inform the decision. What I think really helped focus across the board the last couple of days was the idea that what we need is scope. So that's a really big problem to tackle. And we don't know where we want to scope it just yet. I think that's one of the things that we want to get rolling and moving through. But it was great to see the energy in the room. It was great to see, the engagement. It was great to see some of the challenges, right? People willing to say, no, well, I don't understand where this fits or how this is going. How do we make that point and case a little better? So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think back to the point of what we mentioned beforehand, this needs to be a collaborative effort. And the big piece of it from both, I think, the industry side and FDA side that we want to make sure we're managing and getting past is everybody's got an equal voice. I think that's really hard to get accustomed to when we've been living in this same situation for decades. So that idea that you're bringing to the table just as much of what you think is relevant as FDA is, and FDA is not prescribing. We really do not want to be in that mode. It's going to take some getting used to and some back and forth on things. So, but I thought it went well. It was really well handled, and even just the participants themselves seemed to resolve the issues that came up. So I thought it's a great place to start.
If you have, so those of you that are maybe learning about this for the first time, feel free to, snag one of the members of the MITRE team, Cisco, folks that were in the summit the last 2 days, raise your hands. Any of those folks that were with us the last 2 days as well.